Good evening, my brothers and sisters, and welcome to NWO Race with Time. James, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm pretty good.
Crystal Clark is there.
Hello.
Hello.
How are you guys?
We've been talking about you.
I hope it was good.
Yes.
Well, what more can you ask for? I'll go with that.
Thank you.
All right.
I'm going to sit back and let you go because I did play your song at the intro. It's on the recording. We're set up. We're going fine. And, honey, you got the spotlight, the soapbox, and the mic.
All right. Well, actually, I would like James to go first and discuss the Napoleon and the pyramid issue, because this was actually why we wanted to get back on your show so quickly, because this event happens in 9 days. Are you okay with that, James?
Oh, yes.
Okay, so why don't we start there, and then we can talk about the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, in the end. That would be fine.
Technology is very badly used on this planet. To an extent, it was badly used in another timeline, base timeline, at one point. And in about 9 days, they're going to instrument something that'll affect the past in what creates the timeline we're in now. Now, this seems very difficult to understand, that we could be determined, that our past could be determined by what's going to happen in the near future. But you have to understand that my favorite saying, if time travel is possible, will ever be possible, has ever been possible, it is with us now. And the full ramifications of that explain how this works. Let me say this. In the base timeline, Napoleon did not lose at Waterloo. But being able to determine the outcome of Waterloo before it actually happened was something that allowed the Rothschilds to get a grip on the financial institutions in England, and eventually was the leverage to do so in the entire world, and today they control banking in the world. They control monetary systems in half the world, and they're working on, no one will benefit more from the New World Order takeover than them. So once you realize what a big deal this is, then you realize why, if they could do something like I'm going to talk about, they would certainly do it. It's a historical anomaly that Napoleon lost at Waterloo, to begin with. Military historians have debated that for a long time, and many have concluded that the only possible reason was that Napoleon ordered his cavalry on soft ground. No battle is just the cannons or just the infantry or just the cavalry. These are elements. And it wouldn't be the first time that Napoleon had overcome an adversity. He was very good at it. During his campaign in Egypt, Napoleon spent a night in the Great Pyramid. And during that stay, something happened to him. He came out and he possessed what Crystal and I refer to as extra knowledge. And the first thing he did was order his cannoneer to shoot on the face of the Sphinx. Why? Probably because he knew that wasn't the correct face, that some pharaoh from the past had had the ego to put his face on the Sphinx instead of what was there originally, the face of a lion. Then he goes to the Valley of the Kings, straight to an undiscovered tomb that's sealed, and has his men dig it. And they find quite a bit of wealth. It belonged to the successor of Tutankhamun. This was a greedy man. He had married Tutankhamun's sister after Tutankhamun died, and he had amassed all the taxes and kept them for his tomb for a number of years, both in the Upper and Lower Nile. And he had constructed a 20-foot, 3 feet in diameter pillar of solid electrum. So Napoleon tried to drag that back to Egypt across the desert, and only got as far as the first oasis village, and had to leave it there because he kept wearing out one team of horses after another. But Napoleon changed quite markedly, and the reason that I even bring this up is that the recent find in Napoleon's skull of an implant chip. And I knew about this and waited for if this would ever happen, and it did. I think the disclosure was made simply to find out if somebody out here in broadcast land might have an idea about what it was doing there, because we're talking about something that in late 18th century just simply didn't exist. So what I am saying is that this was a rare time for Napoleon to ever be alone. He was always with a bodyguard. And it was connived for him to be alone. The schedule was made, and a group of technicians, and this is yet to happen in literal time, will go back to that date, to that point where he is in the pyramid, and they will implant this chip in his head, and it will change him. And he will become like what he hated most, kings and queens and the Jesuits, which he did. And I'm not sure that he made any error in judgment at Waterloo. I think he probably intended to lose. Now, that's a remarkable statement, but when you follow his campaigns and his instincts, his ability to retain the loyalty of his men in crisis, there's not much other than that explanation to how he behaved. The Rothschilds will admit that they made a tremendous amount of money by staking their fortune on the outcome of Waterloo, claiming that they didn't have any prior knowledge, but that they just had someone stationed there that could get the message back of the outcome of Waterloo by carrier pigeon flying the English Channel, of course. Well, they were investing heavily before that outcome, so they were staking it before that outcome, and that's why that explanation won't hold. They had positioned themselves very well on the basis of Napoleon losing. Of course, once that you intervene in time, you create an alternative timeline, because time is not linear, it is serial. And once the thing is changed, in order to protect the lineage of the basic timeline, everything is designed in a way to accommodate or to compensate for this kind of evil. So the base timeline has gone on with the contingent that Napoleon won at Waterloo, which is the way that it should have happened if there hadn't been an intervention and if the continuum hadn't been damaged by creating an alternate timeline. And we are in an alternate timeline. I'm sure people have heard me talk about this being a partial manifestation, and that's what I mean. Its existence is contingent on what they're going to do on the 9th of September. If for some reason they decide not to do it, this timeline will end, like it never existed. Just about everyone here will not ever have been born. So you have mixed feelings when you think about it. Certainly, I can't talk about any details about other than what I've said about the base timeline, because you create options when you have such knowledge, even of a parallel universe or parallel timeline. You create options, things can happen, and you can create a third alternate timeline, and the more you create of these things, the worse it is. People call these things a paradox. But the madness that you have of a science perverted to weaponry and perverted to maintaining the elite at all costs in their status quo has caused them to trying to construct a method of destroying the base timeline. And they think that will materialize this one fully. The biggest mistake they could make, because it'll destroy both. Also destroy the solar system. So that's not going to be allowed to happen. But they don't know that.
So, James, in telling this story, well, first of all, let me make this point. In a sense, for our situation here, the situation we already have, the important thing isn't when they left, it's when they arrived. So, you and I are living in a deviated reality that they've altered from having arrived before most of us were born. They do this in 9 days. And I would like for James to explain, because this is not something that James himself can prove. It's not something provable for us. as just listeners and researchers.
Well, the people that are doing it know.
They know, and I would like you to maybe go a little bit deeper into why you're discussing it, why you feel like it's so important to discuss. For their sake.
I think that wisdom is born of acknowledging possibility and knowing option. And I'm hoping that, although I can't explain what I'm going to say, because I don't want to be a participant, that's not my point. I would like for them to search for other alternatives. I won't even say they exist, but this is single-mindedness. It is not something that sane men should do, and the repercussions of this are going to end badly, and there might be better things to do. But I bring it up because they found the chip and the behavior of Napoleon after his visit in the pyramid. I look at it this way: if I can explain anomaly and pull all the loose ends together, put it together in a way that answers all the anomaly, and I challenge anybody to present anomaly regarding this that I haven't considered and see if I can resolve it. But there are wise things that are possible when you explore. And doing something for short-term objectives, like making a bunch of gluttonous pigs richer, that is not science. That is being a puppet to nothing but greed and avarice, desire for power of life and death over others. And is that really something that science should be about?
James, I think that Dave posted a question from the chat about someone having mentioned that the timelines had been unified, and I'll address it very quickly, but I don't think that if people understand how the split occurred, they can't really make that assertion. But I'll let you address that in more depth.
No, in fact, all you have to do if you want to see how untrue that is, like I say, get the software that'll show you a fix of the sky at wherever you are at a specific time and location and date, and one night get your fix. Go outside and look at the stars. Do that for every night for a week, and you'll see that at least twice during that week, the sky's not going to be right. The moon won't be where it should be sometimes. Sometimes the sun will set down in the wrong place in the horizon, not the same place it should. Just open your eyes. You will see that too many things are wrong with astral movement to our perception, because we don't fit in. We are like a chunk of unreality trying to manifest. And that's what we are.
So let me clarify what you said about the position of the stars, James. So are you saying that before this intrusion was made, that we had star charts, and that after that intrusion occurred, that's why they no longer line up? Is that what you're saying?
Well, we have the base timeline has a fully manifested planet. We're not, but we have to be out of the way of the fully manifested base timeline planet, or everything will go. These two can't occupy the same place. Even though one is partially manifested, it can't occupy the same place, and so it is arranged that these two never coincide.
But still, are you saying that a person would be able to begin to lean in this direction by comparing what we have here in our star charts versus what we had charted before this happened?
Well, no, it's just a matter that we're not in the same position where the planet should be. We really never are. We're offset, but sometimes it's more noticeable than other times.
Well, what I'm really asking is, in terms of, we're not where we should be based on what? What would we use to determine this software program that you're referring to, for example?
Well, you go outside and you look at the chart. That's where you should see everything. That's the fix on the sky at that time when you're looking at it. And if it's not there, if the constellations aren't exactly where they're supposed to be, the moon isn't where it is, and the planets, then you know things are wrong. You know you are out of time. You're what the arcane masters call in between two worlds.
Okay, but again, I want to try to clarify this because I know this is a question that people have. So using this software package, it will tell us where the constellations should be based on the original timeline. Is that right? Because otherwise, where are they getting what it should look like? Where is that coming from? At what point did they decide this is what it should look like, and then we can therefore compare what we see with that? Where did that come from?
Well, that's the standard that goes all the way back. They know what the fix should be. But this is the fix that should be the case for the base timeline planet.
Okay, right. That makes sense.
But it never corresponds exactly. And sometimes it's so far out of whack that it's obvious. Because although you can't see, feel, or touch the base timeline planet, it's there. And if these two ever come together, that would be a singularity. If they ever touch, that would be a singularity.
So what you're saying is, just to clarify, is you're not saying that these two are mergeable as two independent timelines. It has to be one or the other, but at no point will they converge again into one mainstream.
Of course not.
Okay.
Of course not. Just look at it this way. Once that intervention changed everything. It changed when Napoleon won. The English monarchy throughout Europe fell, came down. He hated the Jesuits. The first thing he did was the Inquisition, which was run by the Jesuits. And the end of these institutions led to a democratization of Europe in its entirety and most of the rest of the world. And they went through, I would say, Republican forms of government as a consequence. This is an inevitability. I'm not giving anything away because this would have made a great deal of difference. Now, I'm not saying that the outcome at this time, right now, I'm not saying that the outcome is the same. But I'm just saying that we are in a phase difference right now because this is the thing nobody's asking me, which tells me nobody understands what I'm talking about. You have to understand that there is a reflection phase. It's between the base timeline on the 9th, because these people are doing this in the base timeline.
Right. What year was that?
What year was what?
What year did they go back to?
1789.
Okay, so after 1789, those of us in this timeline are not experiencing a fully manifested reality anymore. And even though they go back and they do it in 9 days, you and I, and pretty much everybody living right now, are living in something that was never supposed to be.
Yeah.
And I think what's hard for a lot of people to reconcile about what you said, in that if it's corrected, and it should be corrected, that pretty much all of us may have never been born.
It's unlikely that any of you will have been born as you are. Now, your spirits, they're complete, and it's not like, your value as an entity doesn't exist. It exists. It's just that you will not have had this life, and your ancestors all the way back to 1789 would not have had, there's no matchup.
Right, I understand. They would have had the opportunity to make completely different choices because their destiny wasn't being controlled through this manipulation in time.
I would say that after 10 years, after this intervention happens, that the effects, the impact would be so remarkable that there would hardly be anyone that would be paralleled in the, would have the same existence as they would have in the base timeline. Because that's the way it operates. The ramifications go so far and so deep when you change a major event like this, that so many things start flying into the wheels of progress that alter. You would have some indigenous people that might be untouched in the Amazon basin, or some of the people that are unaffected by cultural differences and that communicate with the civilizations that this would affect. But still, there are going to be minute changes and differences even then. And they could be a catastrophic event that happens in the base timeline that doesn't happen here, or one that happens here that doesn't happen in the base timeline. So the effects can be just incredible. Let's just suppose, for instance, that there are other options that are explored and developed in the base timeline that aren't here, in energy and transportation and communication. So you just don't know. I mean, I know, but I can't share any of that.
Well, I would think that's a given at this point because of everything they work so hard to suppress to maintain their power. So if they didn't have that power in the base timeline, I would like to think that things went the way they were supposed to.
Well, if they decide not to do it on the 9th, it's the throw of the dice. But you've got to figure out what your chances are and, be wise. If things continue the way they are right now, there's going to be a great deal of suffering.
Yes, and in the end, we won't survive.
Yeah, no one's going to win. The madness, we are being led by people that have lost touch with reality if they've ever had it. Or things like what I'm talking about wouldn't happen. I mean, why would any sane person want to intervene with time? I mean, once you understand the complexities and the ramifications in what you're doing, and there are things I haven't even discussed, but when you affect a continuum, you run risks. And one of the things that happened recently, that when Kevin Smith was alive, he did a show with Robert McDonald about some extinct animals that were showing up in this forest. And my idea about what they were doing there, and they were dead and had no organs except for an extinct wolf that got hit by a car. My idea of what was happening is that they were being transported in a rift. These rifts are created by displacements in time. And when you do anything like this, when you actually detonate a hydrogen bomb, you create a rift in time, and time has to be corrected. And eventually, once things are settled socially, and your science is back, or you've extincted yourself or whatever, there are people that come in and fix the continuum, repair it. If this wasn't done, nothing would last as long as it does. There wouldn't be systems that you could depend on. Everything is designed. I mean, there's nothing that isn't. It's not a matter of chance. I mean, nothing survives in chaos.
So someone in the chat, James, it looked like, asked what is the mechanism that they're going to use to go back in 9 days to create the timeline, the split, the partially manifested timeline that you and I are currently living in. And also, maybe you could add to that the technology in terms of the chip that they used and why that was so effective.
They're using a Generation 4 clipper chip that they've just perfected that affects human behavior. It doesn't have to have a power source. It operates on the energy of the body. And it can create a bias. And this bias can determine certain things about behavior. So it's almost, you could say, self-implementing. It's evil. Who would do that to another person?
And this chip was recently developed. This is the new generation. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Okay, and maybe you can talk about what mechanism they're going to use to go back. The individual in the chat who asked the question that Dave posted for us on Skype mentioned CERN.
Well, these are power sources for directing certain things, but basically time travel began with interdimensionalism. And the first development of it, of course, was at Montauk, and it was very crude. It psychically tore people apart. You can't do it even today without radical damage to tissue, human tissue. It's kind of like a high-altitude flight right now since Fukushima is putting out all this radiation, and you're up there where you're only getting maybe a tenth the shielding you should if you're down below. So you're getting radiation, and you're going to suffer. Well, the same as with this time travel, because of the energy that is being used, is being expended, is harmful to human tissue. But where I live, they've been experimenting with interdimensional travel now for some time, and I've pointed out to friends, including Kevin Smith when he stayed with me, airplanes that were going straight down had acquired the speed to do this and freezing in the sky. Now, that's not the plane that you see. That's a pattern of the plane you see, so that when this traveler, pilot, or whomever's in that plane has slipped into interdimensional travel. Now, when he comes back, that freeze right there is a pattern to restore him to this dimension. Now, when they come back, sometimes they're not the same. Sometimes what comes back isn't what left. Now, there are better ways of doing it, which they don't understand, or they really don't care about the human cost. They never have. But they do this experimentation several times a week here, and if you go out at dusk, as the light is changing, and you look in the western sky where they have this vortex charged, then you will see a plane coming over and then going straight down and freezing in the sky. And it may be there until after dark. It may slowly, very slowly, going straight down, it may go 15 arc degrees in 45 minutes. And then, of course, the light will be gone. You can't see it anymore. But that's the experimentations to develop what I'm talking about. Once they refined it to where they could put people back in time or forward in time, which is a different problem there. But back in time, if they put you back in time, of course, the complexity is great. And these people don't always come back. And they usually get lost.
So based on what you just said, I would like to clarify this. You mentioned before that two things can't exist in the same space. Our Earth and our timeline can't exist in the same space as the other. So this goes back to what you said when they went back. There can't be two of them in the same space at the same time. There can't be two of us in the same space at the same time. So that's what caused the split.
There's so many things that go wrong. People have tried this in different cultures and civilizations among the ETs and found out they didn't want to do it again. It's just like once that the nations of the world had tried detonating hydrogen bombs, after a while they figure out they don't want to do it anymore because it changes time. Anything that matches the energy of your star will change time because your star is your timekeeper. Now that may sound oversimplified or anything, but it really is just as simple as that.
Well, and it is interesting, too, that Edgar Cayce talked about how the sun is a recorder of information. So would you say that that's connected to what you just said?
Of course. Well, it's not just the sun. If people could read the light, and there's some civilizations that can, it's coming in from other stars. Pick it up and read it. It has messages. It has broadcasts. You know, there are people in deep space right now that had an opportunity to watch every television program, radio program. Nothing dies. This energy doesn't die, and neither does the transmission of it. Everything is coded into the energy. You know, we think in terms of pushing things through the air, forcing things or whatever, but light is constant. You know, light that's 1 billion years old is coming through right now. Right here, hitting us. And it's got a story to tell if we could read it. But, of course, we don't expend any technology to do things like that.
Well, and I would add that this has been a really big peeve of mine, because this is something that I wrote about in the first book, and I really dislike the love and light New Age movement, because people don't understand that light carries information, it's knowledge. And we have an awful lot of unknowledgeable people out there that are causing themselves an awful lot of harm because they don't have what they need to direct their own free will properly to their best interests and to their own benefit, which is what I often refer to as participating in their own demise out of ignorance. And this is something that people really need to take seriously, because this particular timeline is forcing us down a road where we're going to meet the same end that our ancestors did, because they couldn't admit that they didn't know what they needed to either and didn't do anything about it. So when secrecy becomes part of the equation from those in control, the outcome is the same over and over and over again, and that's the outcome that we will have here in this timeline.
Yeah, I think what breeds this compulsion towards secrecy begins or gives license to it. Because if you'll just stop and think, you are taking away other people's power for self-determination when you are keeping secrets about things that affect them.
That's right.
But the root of this is in mystery religions. That's where it starts. When you give up your volition, your ability to make your own personal judgments about things and buy into this faith crap, look what you're giving up. You're setting yourself up for doing this and other things. It's a model for behavior that's going to propel you into the future to making the same mistake over and over again. Well, turn the other cheek. One thing after another, and it gets misinterpreted. It's no longer wise. It's just blind faith. And we can't afford to operate on blind faith.
No, we can't, because the people that have trained us to are the ones that we're supposed to put our faith in. And if they continue to occupy the positions of power that they do and abuse them the way they are, 7 billion people won't survive it. Again, I mean, this is the thing. You know, religion at no point encourages you to get involved to change your situation because it tells you that you're not capable. You can't speak directly to God. Jesus has to come and fix it for you. Or it's written in stone because God said so, and that's what's in your Bible is what God said, and it's just going to go south no matter what, so just mind your P's and Q's and wait to get raptured out of here. And the New Age community has been rebranded. It's the same story. It's been rebranded over again. Well, you know, just think happy thoughts, which is the religious equivalent to say your Hail Marys, and you're going to ascend out of here. Just hang tight until, you know, or ET is going to come. What you understand is that at no point are you ever encouraged to get involved and do it yourself, because that's the answer.
Well, this is very important. This is important to what we've been discussing from the very beginning tonight. This is very important. I don't believe in trying to give a person a reward just to do the right thing. But I'm going to say something, and this will probably make me feel bad for a long time. But I'm going to say something. There is in humanity the ability to determine more for himself and for others than anyone on this planet can imagine, including me. I don't know what this split consciousness is capable of. It has a fearful intensity. But I think it's survivable. I think it can be civilized. And because, you know, you have an inbred elite, you take away the inbred elite and don't buy into the BS that their underlings have sold you about, well, you'd do it too if you had the chance. Well, no, I wouldn't. Crystal wouldn't. I know a number of people. I don't think Dave Corso would, because they have to live with themselves. But these people, these inbred, and I don't mean just biologically inbred, I mean they're entrained inbred. And they're brought up to believe they're better than everyone else, and that we're useless eaters, and that they are privileged, that they have a bloodline or whatever, which means nothing. It means not a damn thing. And once that we stop pandering to this, once that we realize that with self-determination, with focus and with direction, with holding true to a set of values that can get us somewhere, and realizing that we're all in this together except for a few that have gone nuts. We do that, we can have the world we want and deserve. But that's not happening, and right now, we could have World War III in the next few days. I'm not saying we will. I'm not saying that that's even likely, but that's a possibility is horrible enough. That should be so remote out of the question, but it's not. And, you know, anybody that's been listening to the news knows that it's a possibility. It's more a possibility right now than it was over the Cuban crisis back in the 60s.
You know, and I think, too, that this is a good opportunity to point out that for people who still believe that we can only suffer to learn the lesson, this is a good chance to ask ourselves honestly, how many times do you have to suffer to learn it? How many world wars do we have to have? We know what Hitler did, but we're repeating it. So is suffering teaching us anything? Not really. We're not learning what well, first of all, we're not taking self-responsibility. Everybody's passing the buck. Somebody else's fault. Somebody else is going to fix it. It doesn't work like that.
Crystal, that is why that some of the good people from prior extinctions left halls of record, because they wanted people to know that don't buy into this. Don't buy into these false values, these false teachings, and you won't come to the same end we are. They had a point where they could see it was inevitable. They could see that if things didn't radically change, that what was going to happen, that the end was inevitable. There wouldn't be survivors.
That's right.
And they knew that. And so, in every year or so, they find a new hiding place for the elite. A lot of rooms underground, all kinds of accommodations and so forth for the elite that were going to survive their own mistakes. And they don't. That's a wonderful thing, I think, that the people that cause these things are going to suffer too. They're going to end up probably dying more miserably than what they call the useless eaters, the people that, you know, they are deserting to the effects of their mistakes.
I can see from some of the questions that this is a very difficult concept to understand. There are folks that think they trace their lineage back to, Lord Nelson, or if they may not have been born into the new timeline. So I'll try to explain it one more time. It's not when they leave, it's when they went back to. So they went back. They implanted Napoleon, and he made choices on their behalf, which created the timeline that we have now. So everything after that moment, every choice every individual made was based on an altered set of parameters and experiences and social constructs in a completely different reality. So it's not that we wouldn't have been born in this new timeline. We're in the new timeline. This is the aberrant timeline. This was not supposed to happen. And it doesn't, I personally get really irritated with people who say, well, we're in the good timeline, because if this is good, I'd really hate to see what's bad, to be honest. An honest look around will tell you that there's a very real problem. So I get that it's hard to understand, but just recognize that the moment they went back to the time of Napoleon, that caused the split, and you and I are in the timeline that they altered for their own benefit, which is why they run the world, and we're subjected to what they do to us, because they achieved their power by doing that. So then the question becomes, why would they not do it on the 9th?
Crystal, I don't think that people really understand how damaged they are in their ability to perceive the kind of thing we're talking about. I've found so many people that are intelligent and are aware and trying very hard to understand how this works, how this mechanism works. But they have been prepared not to understand it. They have been prepared that this is just, this is science fiction, and we know that science fiction doesn't happen. Well, that's not true. That is not true. And the people will tell you, if you can think of something, it can exist. But
true.
When it comes home to them, they're the last, I saw a movie. Well, there are a lot of incredible people that have made movies and had fantastic ideas, but, when they go to produce, they take away so much of the fantastic, of the complexity and so forth, because they got to aim that movie at a 12-year-old. What they think is the mentality of a 12-year-old, and, it's not a bright 12-year-old. So it's a dumbing down process, and on one hand, and on another, it's, this subject has been treated, and it's fiction because the movie was made, and it was fiction. And this puts a false construct in people's mind and an impression this can't happen because a movie was made about it that was fiction. So how many times have you heard somebody, that was in a movie, and just pass it off from there? Well, the fact that there are people that are here that are thinking about these things and weighing them in their mind and considering them shows you the possibilities, that it's possible. And at what point do the anomalies point to the things like the chip in Napoleon's head, like the fact that you can go outside and see the sky's not right, like so many things that they're hiding from you. They're hiding the papyrus from Tutankhamun's tomb, for Christ's sake. Why? When you start trying to figure out what the secrets are they're trying to keep by the evidence that they're keeping those secrets, it should start telling you that it's something important enough to help you put things together that don't make sense otherwise, that are anomalous. And it's like I say, you tackle the anomaly. They are the clue to the next step up for science, for solving mysteries like we are right now. And what does science do? Science is entrained by the people that grant these contracts, the corporations that are run by people that, it's such a big corporation. There's so much money behind it and everything that the Illuminati or the Jesuits or something worse has infiltrated it like a 33rd degree Mason. These people are parasitic in the way they operate. They don't have the future of mankind at heart. Never did.
No, they have the future of their own power at heart, and that's something that we talked about last week with Dave during that impromptu show, is why aren't they showing people what's in these archaeological finds? Because if they release the information, we would know what they're doing because it's happened before. We were warned about going down this road. So again, one wonders, in leaving records behind, if they're exceptionally detailed, you run the risk of infecting a new civilization, because if the wrong people find it first, is it a how-to guide or a warning guide?
It just depends on, if it's shared. If it's shared, but it's not. You get the wisdom, but if it's not, well, I think the monsters don't need to know the how-to, because I think that they have been inbred for so long. When you start having kings and you have emperors, and then they deify themselves, or worse, the end product is you're breeding people that you have given the power of life and death over you, who consider you worthless. What do they do today? Today, they call people that are not on the inn a useless eater. And they plan to get rid of us. I'm a useless eater. Crystal, you're a useless eater.
But the question I think that we're trying to address is, would that be the case if the alteration hadn't happened?
I can't tell you. I can tell you that.
Well,
I wish, oh man, it's so hard. It is so hard. It is.
Well, and that's the thing. We've had our futures, our evolutionary future, interfered with by people who cannot maintain their power if everybody evolves at the same rate.
It's not even a matter of that, I would tell you, but the thing is, in telling you, I'm putting the options out there to change this one and create a third one. And on and on and on. It just never ends.
Well, my personal feeling is that we're going to be stuck in this one and that we have to try to make the best of it. So if we do that, if we overcome the psychopathy that will again lead billions of people to another self-destruction episode, can we become fully manifested if we do so?
You're asking me to give you a carrot for doing the right thing. That's what you're asking me to do.
I'm asking for...
You're asking for divine intervention is what you're asking for.
Well, I think really what I'm asking for is confirmation of what I already know, is that, it's cause and effect. And if we do the right thing, we should expect to live in a world that functions the way it should, whether it's partially manifested or not. I mean, all the suffering that's happening around us isn't not happening because we're partially manifested. It's happening because we aren't doing what we should to prevent it. So, how many generations have lived and died and suffered in a partially manifested reality? Can we stop the suffering? Yeah. Should we?
Well, let me do what I can to satisfy that question. I'll do what I can. If you just bear with me now. Do you believe that the universe has consciousness?
Yes.
And do you believe what I've said all along, that it's constantly looking for variation?
Yes.
And if it finds something really valuable, something outstanding, something that can reverse trends and do something very remarkable it hasn't seen before, do you think it's going to let it die?
No.
Right.
Okay. So, James, maybe just to go over this a little bit more, you've used the phrase extra knowledge. I've used the phrase extra knowledge. So maybe you can discuss that a little bit more, because I am a believer that we do get information coming in from other places through light. And I think that chemtrails, whether by hook or by crook, are also somewhat robbing us of that experience, which is kind of irritating. But could you maybe explain extra knowledge, and also what happened to Napoleon in the pyramid? How did they get to him?
Well, they have other technologies too. So second technology, they have a way of knocking you out. So when he was there, they played a scenario, and something happened that caused him to access in this environment. The Great Pyramid and a number of other pyramids of a certain type have had instruments in them which have left residues. And these are kind of like a vortex or portal or whatever. If they're energized, the residue, the direction, template, vernier frequency, dialing, whatever you want to call it, it can operate in a way that it has in the deep past in other lineages. Because the Great Pyramid has been here a lot longer than people suppose. It's much older. And so there have been 2 lineages that have come and gone with it there. And both these lineages had these devices. The pyramid is built to withstand the greatest amount of upheaval, the greatest amount of crust movement, or any number of things because of the way it's designed. So when this energy that delivered these people in there to interfere with Napoleon, it also created something that affected his subconscious in a way that he could see things he had wondered about, and the answers came to him. That's extra knowledge. Extra knowledge is what happens when you can somehow, due to something happening to you, some kind of shock or whatever, you get a window into this genetic knowledge that is passed on from prior experiences. Some people talk about incarnations or whatever. I don't know about that. I don't incarnate. I can't talk about that, Spirit life is something else. I've seen a lot of things, but I haven't experienced them. So that Napoleon had access, and he knew, when he came out of there, he knew where Horemheb's, or Horemhobab as I call him, they knew where his tomb was. He knew where his tomb was. And that had been searched for and searched for and searched for because it was known historically that electrum was in there. It was worth the king's ransom. And he also knew that face on the Sphinx wasn't right, which annoyed him greatly.
So let me stop you there. When you say it wasn't right, what was the face on the Sphinx when he was there?
The face of a pharaoh.
Of a pharaoh. And what should it have been?
Lion.
A lion. So is that why he destroyed it?
Well, he just knocked a chunk out of it. He had his cannoneer fire on it and knocked a chunk out of it, that chunk that you see missing today.
So is that why he did it, though, do you think?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because he knew the face wasn't right.
All right, so he did that of his own volition. So did they actually chip him inside of the pyramid when he was alone?
Yes. Oh, yeah. They chip him, and, of course, it takes a while for his character to alter. I mean, it's not an immediate thing.
I see.
It's like a bias. It's like if you make a person feel justified doing bad things to people, they'll do bad things to people.
Right.
With him, he decided he'd be emperor, and that was a big mistake, and began to lose the support of the people and began to be extravagant. So even when he came back after exile and reestablished the 100-day empire, that's when he affected even more of these monarchical trappings. And, it didn't agree with the French people, who still remembered the Ancien regime and hated it. You have to realize that anybody that had the successes, Napoleon, to fall from grace, he had to have changed because he had the loyalty of his men, of his armies.
So this chip that they used, this Clipper 4 chip, is that what you call it, right?
Mm-hmm. Generation 4.
Fourth generation, yeah. Okay, so this chip they've recently developed, which they use in 9 days to go back on Napoleon, which creates the world that we here live in now, which is incredibly favorable to those who are power mongers. So this chip was, are you saying that it was pre-programmed in a way to alter his behavior so that somebody didn't have to be there constantly sending signals to it?
Well, with the mapping of the brain, they know that they can put something that affects a small bias that can make a big difference to behavior, values, all sorts of things, just merely where they put it. They wanted to affect his behavior so that he didn't have the same feelings about the monarchy and the Jesuits and so forth.
So it was pre-programmed. It's not a constant signal, is what you're saying. Is that right?
No, it's not a signal. It's a bias. It's like a charge in a certain part of the brain which affects certain
beliefs. They had a chip that they were trying to develop. There's a video of it. A lot of the listeners have probably already watched the video about how they could... Oh, no, actually, no, this was a vaccine where they could go in and give people a vaccine that would reprogram the brain so they wouldn't be fundamentalists anymore. So, yeah, they've come a long way with stuff like this.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's why they had to wait this long, and that's why 2 things had to come together, the technology to actually surgically time travel And, of course, this has to be done in the base timeline.
And by surgically, you mean to be precise in their point of entry in finding the individual that they're looking to alter.
Yeah. This had to be set up. First of all, they had to be sure it'd be there. And they corrupted one of his generals and made sure that he made sure Napoleon was in there at the right time, that everything would be set up. Because when you do things like this, even in setting them up, you change the past before you do it. Remember what I told you about reflex. The reflexive mirror-like, it's an aspect that it's real hard to say, but those animals, they fell out of a time rift. It wouldn't have existed if the continuum had been messed with and if there weren't these rifts created that, are useful to people that know how to use them, like transporting things. It's what the Mothmen fall out of, and it's what those animals that were extinct. There were people that had gone back. They were trying to salvage animals from the past. They had everything, up to the present. They were going back into the deep past and getting animals that were extinct during the last ice age. So they've got them. They're bringing them back, and something happens, probably harp, and they fall out of that rift. Of course, the process requires them to remove the organs and preserve the organs in a certain way, and then they put them back, and they get the animal there. They have a tremendous zoo of, you have no idea what the extended community is. God. Oh.
James, you've mentioned before that, and for people listening, they're scrubbing the internet really, really fast when this stuff comes out. So I recommend that if you can't print out certain articles, that you take a screenshot and save it onto a thumb drive. But there was, a few weeks ago or so actually by now, if you did a search for Napoleon with an implant, you would find the article that talked about it. So this isn't something that you just made up. You're trying to help add clarity to what was discovered. But you've mentioned before that he wasn't the only one, that there were Pharaohs who also were chipped.
Yeah. In their case, these were chips that were devices that they could use. These were ETs. The first dynasty after the Upper and Lower Nile were united into the kingdom. That Pharaonic dynasty were ETs, and they had elongated heads, and every one of them had a chip in their head, if they ever looked. Or maybe they have. They just haven't shared it. Probably somebody that discovered Napoleon's chip wasn't a member of the Let's Keep It a Secret club.
So the chips in the Pharaohs, and just to clarify for people, they've only went back in time once. Our crazy psychopaths here have only went back in time once, which is why we only have the one extra timeline. Is that right?
That's right. Now, that doesn't mean that they haven't tried interdimensional travel. They haven't figured out what phasing is yet, but that's something else.
Maybe we can come back to that, because somebody in the chat did ask about the Philadelphia experiment, which I also wanted to ask about. But in terms of these pharaohs that were microchipped, this was a time when there were men and members of the extended community, I don't like the word ET, that were living together, and that some of them were actually in Egypt, were rulers, and were trying to help man kind of find a better way of doing things. So what were their chips for? What was that for? Connection to home? Or because, here, a lot of us understand that chipping a human being is very, very wrong because of the type of world we live in, and we know that will lead to abuse. So it may be difficult for a person to understand that in a civilization where people aren't aberrant and psychopathic, that there could actually be some very positive uses for something like that. So can you explain more about that?
Yes, it was corrective. It enabled them to survive conditions that were alien to where they had evolved. So
when did they arrive here? Were they here during a previous lineage and left and came back, or how did that work? Well, it's an awful term. I don't know if there's a different term you would like to give them, but people call them Coneheads. And you've mentioned before that that's why the headdress became standard.
The Coneheads were something else. They were people that were completely different species.
Are these the ones that have the microchips?
No. The heads of the Pharaonic dynasty and the people that they were from were just elongated. In fact, where they were buried, when they were prepared for burial, it was discovered about this, and it was considered a sign of beauty. And it's really strange that it caught on in the New World, too. And people would think that that was an ideal look. And they would take their babies, and they would take two boards and put them and elongate the head of the baby. The Mayans did this. Some of the African people did this. But that came about because they thought they were in fashion with people they held in high esteem. Not all the rulers have been monsters.
So let me get this straight. I mean, you and I have been friends for a while, and a lot of this we've talked about, and so I'm asking questions, for the folks listening, just to make sure that we don't forget any details. But this is interesting. So we had Pharaohs, who were the Coneheads, which is an awful word, I know.
No, they just had elongated head. Now, the Conehead actually looks like a conehead, and these were people that were living up right into the beginning of the Inquisition, the First Inquisition. And there were some in Paris, France, during the Huguenot massacre, and they were massacred along with the Huguenots. And there are paintings that you can find from that period which show them. The idea that the Catholic Church attached such enigma to a conehead that the dunce cap is modeled after a conehead, because they wanted people to think, well, these are just subhumans. Well, they weren't subhumans.
I see. So we didn't have any genuine coneheads that were pharaohs.
Their heads just extended back about 6 inches further than the normal head would today of Homo sapien.
Okay, but these were also peoples from elsewhere, the Coneheads.
Well, they had been here an awfully long time. I think that probably something had changed their DNA, and it could be light. It could be any number of things. But no, I think they just had some kind of a genetic alteration that proved sustainable, could be passed on to their offspring, and didn't particularly mind it,
Okay, so they developed here.
Yeah.
Okay, so we did have pharaohs that were microchipped that did not develop here.
Right.
And is there features, or are they just so similar to us that it would require some type of a genetic?
The face is more feminine. Face of the men is more feminine.
Can you give an example?
Well, the men had a feminine torso and a feminine face.
No, when I say example, can you give us a name?
Yeah, Ramesses.
Ramses. Oh, yeah. Okay. And when did they arrive here?
Well, they are the people that established a presence in the Grand Canyon and carved all those runes and had all those intricate machines and battery salts that we now use in our probes and our rovers and so forth that last years and years and years without a charge. That would have been right towards the end of the last ice age that they arrived.
So are these people connected to the Anasazi?
No. Anasazi were something else. You're wondering how they disappeared?
Most people are, yes.
Well, they were rare people. There was an expedition. Due to whatever happened, I'm not sure of all the details of this, but they had established a friendship with off-Earth intelligence, and their elders were remarkable. They weren't typical of most cliff dweller peoples, and they had a society that was very close. And they went through a number of adversities and were on the verge of being wiped out by disease. They used sandstone matat to grind their corn. They were remarkable people, and because of certain problems with their diet and other things, they succumbed to a disease, and they approached someone that was hibernating here, let's say, and asked for help. And he helped them, and they decided that they wanted to follow him, and he became very fond of them and decided that this wasn't the place for them to be.
I see. I think that's another really important thing. You hear people say, well, if we aren't fighting each other anymore and we aren't struggling with disease and poverty and everything's fine, what are we going to do? Just sit around and contemplate our belly buttons all day? And I really hate to hear that because it's so short-sighted. Because, our existence here on this planet is a very tiny grain of sand in terms of what's really possible for us to experience. And even this tiny grain of sand, poverty does not let 99% of the people on this planet explore it. They can't go to other countries. They can't go to the Virgin Islands. They can't go swim with the dolphins. Their children don't get to see the Grand Canyon. Not to mention the fact that there are so many anomalies here on this planet that we don't explore because the powers that be are keeping it for themselves. And so truthfully, we don't even understand our own planet. And I think that's really sad. I mean, I personally would like to see in the future a time when every individual gets to go to another country and stay for a few months, any country of their choice, just to learn their culture, to learn their ways, to see what their terrain is like, what their plant life is like, their medicinal herbs. We have so much to learn, even here on our own planet, just about this planet. There are caves that have never been fully explored, bottomless lake. There's just so much that we just don't get to see here. And the wealthy really are the only ones that get to explore it at their whim because they have the money to, which I think is why they feel so comfortable calling it their planet, which is really sad. So we really have a lot to look forward to. And not just here, but elsewhere. And this is something you've talked about a lot, and I think it's very important, is at some point we should return to the stars and begin to have those kinds of experiences. I mean, this planet isn't all there is, but the powers that be don't want us to know that because this is the only planet they have any power over us on. So it's not to their benefit that we actually explore anywhere else but here.
Well, it's the only planet where people are continuing to be savages past technologies that can render extinction. You get to a point, as you're nearing the potential to develop star travel, you get to a point where there's a big hump. And in order to survive your own technology, you have to culturally change. You have to become civilized so that war is not an option any longer. Disease is something that you tackle. You deal with effectively, not just for the edification of affording a physician leisure life, where he works 4 hours and makes $25,000, goes out and plays golf the rest of the day. Those things are not civilized. So you have to change. Everything has to change, and you see that's not what's happening. Right now, they're trying to take us back to the Dark Ages, trying to take us back to feudalism, corporate fascist feudalism. And even then, it won't be for 95% of us that they want to put away. They want to put us in the ground. They've stated that. I mean, anybody that has doubts about that just needs to do a little research. If you did your research, you'd wake up. But you see, there are people that know that won't do it because they know. They do not want to be certain about anything that disturbs the comfort zone. This is what we have to face. We have to face that there are people that go out and put their head in a hole like an ostrich. They really do that. But like I say, that's why if they go 2 days without eating, it'll all change. It'll all change. It's a bad thing to have to happen to wake them up and to make them realize that their comfort zone is an illusion that they cannot afford anymore.
It's suicide.
Well, it's like the person that says, I'm a pacifist and I won't kill and I won't whatever. Then he comes up in a situation where he has to kill to survive, or he has to kill to protect somebody he loves. You'll do it. And if you won't do it, it's not because you have principles, because you're a damn coward.
Yeah, this is something that a lot of people struggle with because of all of the brainwashing.
Yeah.
I think the New Age community I'll tell you my honest opinion, I think the New Age community is dangerous. I think it's more dangerous than religion.
Is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's dangerous because it's no different than the Jonestown massacre. Lay down and die. Take the poison and lay down and die because the reality that's outside of our little phony reality, our little cult reality here is just too harsh for you. Well, whom does that serve? That's dangerous.
People that sell tennis shoes for Heaven's Gate. that just cracked me up. We all got to wear the same tennis shoe and all. My God, how can people fall for things like that? If you get help from outside, it won't be like that.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I think that anybody who really looks at our situation will recognize that we have been given help, but that help has come in the form of giving us time, more time, to help ourselves.
Yeah, and showing that, they show themselves, they demonstrate. But, the thing is, they have approached your leaders. They have talked to them. These aren't just rumors. They've tried to reason.
Well, how do you reason with someone who only wants to know? They don't want to know what the universe is like and how many races are out there. All they want to know is, can you help me build a better bomb?
Well, they want to know how they can vaporize something at a distance, and there won't be anything left of it to have to clean up. Oh, they just love that. Deatomize the thing. That's a principle. I shouldn't have even said that. But the thing that amazes me about these blokes, I like that word, bloke. The thing that amazes me about these blokes is that they are worse in their own comfort zone than the dupes that they have dumbed down. And if you don't believe me, I think they really do believe that there are bases for them to go to on Mars and on the moon if it proves that the holes in the ground they have are not adequate or whatever. And like I say, they don't. I mean, I say it over and over again, you have been shunned. Your space race is over. And there are a lot of scientists that have said this. They acknowledge this. And there's some of the astronauts, we got run off of the moon. We got run off of Mars. They'll tell you that.
Yeah, it's very true. And I think that, if people would really think about, compare sources and think about things genuinely on their own and try to reason them out, we've done all of this before. This is the 7th time. And if at any point, and it's always the same way, it's always the same patterns that cause our own demise. And we have an elite, we have a psychopathic elite that hide things, they hide technology, they create, a caste system, the haves and the have-nots, and it pretty much goes downhill from there once that happens. That pretty much spells out the end if it isn't changed by a certain point. So we are on that same path, we're repeating the loop. And if these people were actually capable of going, taking all of their money and all of their advanced technology, because some of these civilizations are more advanced than we are now, and going out into space, frying everybody on the planet that they don't want here, and then coming back and starting over, then we would actually be living in what you see on Star Wars and Star Trek. We would have something like that, where these people were able to go out into the stars and create a hostile environment where it's imperialism, everywhere they go. But it's not like that. They start over every time the same way we do here. They don't get anywhere. And what's really sad about it is, and what's so important to me, and I think to you, to communicate what we do, is to try to help reach who we can within their repertoire, is they won't survive it either. They never have. And at some point, I would think that if they had records from the past, that they would probably know that.
Well, I'm sure that they're not as straightforwardly aware as you might think. I think that they are craven with materialism. And, nobody's going to get their gold. Nobody's going to get all the wealth that they've hoarded and stolen, and all the land and water that they control, and oil reserves and all that. I mean, they're so eat up with that, that, one little thing could change everything. Could change somebody that knew how to broadcast electricity like Tesla, and could take it from the ionosphere, could charge the ionosphere, produce all the electricity the world would need, and broadcast it. It couldn't be metered. It'd be free electricity, and it'd be free energy.
Yeah. So instead, they'd rather frack and drill and destroy our planet. Yeah.
Well, they have it in their heads that they're going to get enough water. They're going to control enough of the clean aquifers and then contaminate all the rest of the fresh water on Earth, and that will make their water more valuable. It's kind of like Goldfinger. He's going to buy up all the gold, and the gold that he didn't have, he's going to go to Fort Knox and irradiate it so it would be hot for 250,000 years. And that would make his gold worth so much more. I mean, you see the idiots They think about natural resources as the last frontier to just have this obscene wealth and control. It just never ends. Imagine stopping a continent so that you can go and invest in desert, and it's going to be coastline before you're through. Madness. Absolute madness.
Yeah, but actually it does end, and it ends the same way it ended the past 6 times. And I think that they're so arrogant, they believe that they concede where their like-minded predecessors failed, and I'm sure their predecessors thought the same thing. It doesn't work like that. And it would be really nice if they could figure it out, because I would very much like to have a future, and I would like to have them in it if they can actually be part of it for all of us. I mean, that's what's so sad, is that they'd
probably rather die first, Chris.
And that's sad, isn't it? Because they have power to do so much good. All of this, because they're arrogant and they're narcissists and they want attention, they could have it. They could be heroes. They could be global heroes. You remember all that attention Obama got when he first came out? If he had lived up to what he said he would do, people probably really would think he was Superman or born in a manger. But, they just don't do it, even though the way they think, they would also benefit from it. Psychopathy is a very strange thing, and it's very self-destructive.
Well, even if Obama wasn't a psychopath, he's at least a sociopath. And that's not quite as bad. But I guarantee you, supposing that he had any intention of keeping some of those promises, he had some concern. I was surprised the first time I heard a reporter asking, well, I guess you're going to bring jobs back to America and industry. And he said, oh, no, we have to honor our foreign treaties, which told me right away that he had been leading us down the primrose path.
Yeah.
But be that as it may, there's so many other things that are even worse than that, and he's doing them all, but does he have any choice? I mean, you have to understand, if you really want to attack the problem, you have to realize what can and cannot be done, and anybody that's going to get in there is a political animal. Obama is a political animal. It doesn't make him any better or worse to be a political animal, because he wouldn't have got there if he wasn't a political animal. You see, if you can't compromise your morals, you're not a political animal, are you?
Well, I don't know if a person with morals would compromise them.
Well, the fact is, I'm trying to be nice.
Well, I don't know if it's really, I don't know if you should be.
I know. Maybe I'm overdoing being nice. I don't like the word nice anyway.
Well,
but if he tried, let's say transparency, he promised us transparency, that would have worked about 15 days before they would have executed him or assassinated him. And see, he knows that he can be a liar, he can be a traitor, he can betray his oath of office, he can do all those things, and it doesn't jeopardize him. It doesn't bring him, everybody goes and shakes his hand and he can smile and act like he's on top of the world doing criminal things.
Yeah, on top of a dying world that he doesn't have the fortitude to understand and do something about.
And I think that he is perverse enough that he gets a kick out of being able to coast on this to the detriment of everybody else. He's kind of like Nero, fiddling while Rome burns. Well, he's smiling while Rome burns.
Well, yeah, you're being nice, and I'll let you be nice.
I think that he does monstrous things, but he has no choice.
Everybody
has no
a choice. Everybody has.
But you would think. But, once he got picked and selected, it was a matter of what they'd let him do and what they wouldn't let him do. And he knows that.
You and I both know he knew, based on the character of the people that were surrounding him his entire life, what they were prepping him for, and at no point did he go the other way.
You have to understand, Crystal, that there's certain people that if you expect them to have a moral principle, it's like saying, well, here I have a paraplegic, multiple amputee paraplegic, and I'm going to have him go out there and be the best. Okay, the score is 9-up. It's the bottom of the 9th inning. The score is tied. He's going to be the pinch hitter.
Yes, well,
when you expect somebody to make a moral decision, a principle, or to make a moral decision on principle, that's what you're doing.
Yeah.
Then when they don't have it, well, yeah, And it's like this, I've used this analogy before. You can take someone that has the worst addiction you can have, and that's to morphine. And you can kick it cold. The military tried to get me addicted to morphine. And I was told when I was being separated, well, you'll need to go to a doctor and get this, et cetera, et cetera. I said, So I kicked it cold turkey. But here's the thing. People that do it recreationally are not the kind of people that can kick anything cold. That's the difference. And people that have no moral barometer are not the kind of people that can make a moral decision on principle.
Yes, that's true. I notice we only have a couple of minutes left, James. I did have some material that I wanted to talk about regarding the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and we didn't get a chance to, and that's fine because I think that this was more important to get out of the way anyway, in case the right people are listening.
Oh, I think your study on what you're talking about is very important, too, and I think we ought to do another show and we spend the time on that.
Yes, it's definitely important because, from what I can see, this is the corporate charter for the New World Order and that they're finalizing it, and it will end up, for the common individual who survives the changes, they will end up living in a very real world Hunger Games.
Or like Eraserhead, like David Lynch's Eraserhead.
Well, I say Hunger Games because in the Hunger Games, each region was a caste system in which everybody had a function based on what the rulers wanted in terms of resources. And the area that the female came from in the Hunger Games, all of those people were minors. That was their only available opportunity. And based on the signatory countries and the way they're dividing things up, for example, Vietnam is part of that agreement. Vietnam's contribution is the cheap labor.
Well, when you take a people and you tie them to the land or a profession or occupation, that's feudalism. And in that it's the business community doing it, that's corporate feudalism.
It is. It definitely is.
And then when you maintain it with force, that's a corporate fascist police state. And that's pretty close to what we're getting. That's what these monsters are aiming at. And of course, they don't need 95% of the population, and they have it figured out that they will have paradise on earth if they get rid of us. But the fact of the matter is, they've already done so much damage to the planet in getting rid of everybody they didn't want that they're going to need a lot of help and technology they simply don't have. And they can't change gears to get it now. The real issue in that is that there are geniuses all over the place out there, but they don't know how to find them. They go out and they get yes men, and they get them an education. They put them through school and everything, Ivy League, anything that they want, they put them through. But these people can't be creative. They can't be inventive because that would challenge the status quo. So what are they there for? They're there for to be authorities, to say what these people want them to say, and that's all.
That's right. But this Trans-Pacific Partnership is something that people really need to go do some research on. You can find a couple of long videos on YouTube about it that are honest people from all over the world representing their own countries and breaking it down. And basically, it's a secretive trade agreement that even Congress and the press aren't privy to, but there are 600 corporate advisors attending the negotiations and writing the text. And some of that actually includes really absurd things like prohibiting the ability to, quote, buy American or buy local. And it's just really ugly all the way around. So in the meantime, before, we get a chance to do a show on it, people can go look it up on YouTube. And by all accounts, as far as I'm concerned, it is the corporate charter for the New World Order. It will result in a Hunger Games reality for people who actually survive it, if it goes that far. And it's something that, as the experts trying to raise awareness of it have said, can be stopped and pushed back because it's happened before. They have a target date of October 1st, I think it is, which coincides with a lot of other very interesting target dates. DHS's requirements for their bids they've put out for MREs and all these other things. Some training that's going on for military professionals that needs to wrap up by that date. So there's some kind of a strange thing that they've got planned in the fall, in October and November, but it's very true, like these people say, that we can push it back. And in fact, a really great victory was won recently in the UK when they went to vote on going to war against Syria. They didn't get the vote to do it. And I think there were a couple of very, very key people in Parliament who spoke their mind and their conscience and swayed the kind of people that they should have swayed at the last minute. So people should never, ever underestimate that one person can make a difference, because it's the only thing that ever does, and it happens all the time. So people should look at that. But I'm actually ready to wrap it up. I think personally I'm done for the night.
Well, you were you were going strong.
Yeah, that's
I know
that's a cliffhanger for next time. I know.
Well, let's follow this subject up.
It's important. Somebody actually emailed me privately a couple of weeks ago and said, more or less, this is important. Can you help raise awareness of it? And I had not heard about it. And really, I'm shocked because it's such a big, big deal. So definitely awareness needs to be raised, and I'm happy to help do that.
Yeah. Well, the problem we had, because people didn't study NAFTA and GATT and realize that what Perot actually said was absolutely inevitable, and he wasn't whistling Dixie at all. We should have realized what it meant to the United States and to the quality and standard of living of people here. We could have challenged it, and we could have demonstrated very strongly against it. But,
yeah, there just wasn't the awareness.
Americans took it on the cuff.
Yeah, they did. They won't do it again.
No.
People are done with that here. A lot of people are done with that. So I think that if we can raise awareness, we can, really get something done. Some people refer to it as NAFTA on steroids. Other people refer to it as a coup d'etat against democracy. I think it's worse than that.
This is much worse. I think you're right about it being a blueprint for the New World Order.
Yeah, I think they're hammering out the final details of who gets what, and that's not good.
Well, anything that's secret's not going to be good.
That's right. It's a simple formula, isn't it? Secrecy from them equals bad for us.
Every time. Every time.
So I'm ready to call it a night. All right, so are you there, Dave? Mr. Corso?
I'm sitting here just enthralled listening.
Oh, okay, there he is. Thank you very much, Dave, for having us. I really appreciate it, and thank you very much.
You're welcome.
You're listening to Wolf Spirit Radio.